Okay, well, look, we might start. So many of you know me already, but just to introduce myself for those who don't, uh, I have two roles. I run Surrogacy Australia in terms of operational issues, which means advocacy for Australians using surrogacy anywhere, as well as support for Australians who are doing surrogacy here in Australia. Um, that's a voluntary role. We have one part-time paid staff member roles voluntary on that, but that does mean it gives me, or Surrogacy Australia, at least access to government, which is really important at times like this. My other role is with growing families, and that's traditionally been running conferences globally to give people information and education. That's all gone on hold, of course, because of the crisis. So we've pivoted really to doing support for Australians in situations like you guys. So it does mean though that we're in touch regularly with other organisations globally who can help out here in different ways, including surrogacy agencies, lawyers, um, and and other surrogacy communities who are all in the same situation we are. Look, I know this is a really stressful time for you guys. We have been through stressful times before with surrogacy when we had countries like India, Thailand closing down for surrogacy in Cambodia and so forth. So we are used to dealing with government and with emergency travel for these sorts of cases. This particular crisis is harder than most. We, as you would have seen, it's particularly tricky because it's global. Um, but hang in there. We'll make this work for all of you. I'm going to go through some stuff, and there'll be time for questions at the end. The first thing I'm going to talk about is just some general issues that will apply for all of you. Most of you are still in Australia, so we're going to talk about flight options, when you should travel, the travel exemption process for Australia, to leave Australia, the country entry permissions for countries you might be going to, the quarantine requirements on arrival, um, personal protective equipment, and some revised citizenship and passport processes because they've had to be changed on the fly by our government for those wanting Australian or needing Australian citizenship. Uh, okay, so if you're flying to the USA or Canada, the current options are very limited. United and Qatar have flights going in there. Air Canada and Qantas are suspended until end of May. So there's really only two options going in there, and even those, they're very limited flights. If you're wanting to go to somewhere like Ukraine, um, Ukraine is closed, uh, but we can get Australians into a neighbouring country called Belarus. A bit more about that later. Uh, it's with either Qatar or with British Airways plus a local carrier. There's some slides you can look at on there as well. If you're having to go to Greece at a later stage, there's very limited flights right now with about 3 international airlines and 1 local airline. Um, when should you travel? Now, this is a really key issue for many of you, depending on your birth date. Our current advice is if you have a birth before 30 June, you should go as soon as you're able to go. That is once you've got your Australian travel exemption and once you've made any arrangements you need to make here at home. The reason for that is that travel restrictions look like they're going to get worse, particularly in Europe and possibly in the USA and Canada. If your birth's not till after 30 June, then perhaps it's better to wait and see. Um, if those travel restrictions do ease up in the coming months, it is hard to know. Now, look, it might not be that you both go now. Maybe one of you can travel over now and the other one can come later. In terms of the exemption process, many of you have applied for exemptions already. Some of you haven't. We've had, I think, about 74 Australians apply for exemptions. If you've just joined the meeting, just try and mute yourself so we don't hear you shuffling around. There's a mute button somewhere there. About 40 cases have already applied for exemptions for about 74 couples. Those are taking a while to process. So it's tricky. Some of you have already received requests for further information. I know. And some of you, Neelam, can you just turn your microphone on mute? Yeah, thank you. Okay. So what's happening is, if the department, and it's Home Affairs that's doing these travel exemptions, if they're satisfied with the documents you put in, then an underling, a functionary will escalate that for review by a commissioner. There's only one commissioner in Australia who's reviewing all these applications at the moment. If they don't think the documentation is enough, then they'll email you for more documents, and you've actually got to resubmit a whole new application number with a new case number. You can't add a document to a request you've already made. Now, the typical extra documents they're asking for are legal documentation of your arrangement, typically a surrogacy contract. They're asking for letters specifying what the birth date is going to be. Now, if you created embryos in one country, but your birth's going to be in another country, some people made their embryos in the USA, but the birth's in Canada, made the embryos in Australia, it's not good enough to have a letter from the Australian clinic. You need to also have a letter from the birth country attesting to the fact that there will be a birth in that country. Australia is taking these travel exemptions very seriously. So unless you can prove there's a birth there, they're being difficult about it. The requirements also for uploading documents mean there's a maximum file size for supporting documents of 2 meg. So if you've been providing with a document by your clinic that's over 2 meg, you're going to have to reduce the file size. Go into, get someone to do it for you, or get us to do it for you, or get an Adobe Pro account and reduce your file size. The earlier you propose travel date, the higher the priority will be for you. If you can include a flight number on your travel exemption, that will help as well. It'll show sort of, you don't have to attach the itinerary, but show that you're traveling and when you want to travel, because those ones are being prioritized. Okay. Some general travel advice. Now we're talking about getting permission either to leave Australia or to enter a country. Because of the chaos we're in right now, some of these exemptions are coming through pretty last minute. They'll come to you via email, whether it's coming from Australia or from Canada or from Ukraine. Please ensure you have a smartphone charged with email access prior to travel. Some of you will be boarding flights a day away, and the exemption will come through a day before you need to travel. I'm sorry about this, but it's just the way the government's doing it at the moment, because they're basing it on when you need to fly. Transiting through countries. Many European countries have introduced really strict transit arrangements. That is, you would need a letter from your embassy saying you're transiting through Paris or transiting through X or Y airport, and that you're there for a humanitarian reason. We can provide you with forms for that, or your embassy can. But particularly in Europe, even being able to sit in an airport for 6 hours does need special permission. Airports are to a great extent shut down, so be prepared to be self-sufficient during stopovers. Most food outlets are closed. Take your own food with you, take your own entertainment. There's not, maybe each airport has maybe one outlet open, and you might have to walk for miles to find it. Okay, entering country. So for the USA, if you're traveling to the USA, you'll need an ESTA visa, which you get online. As far as we understand, they're not insisting on quarantine on entry at the moment for the USA. Um, for every other country using surrogacy, there is a quarantine period of 2 weeks on entry, and you won't be able to see your child until 2 weeks after you've gone through that quarantine. Now, that quarantine is self-police, so it's not like here in Australia where you put in a hotel. Um, but you will need to, at the airport, show evidence of where you booked to stay and how you intend to order food in and so forth, so that the authorities on the ground know that you've actually got a plan in place. For Canada, you'll need an electronic visa to get in, but you'll also need a letter from government. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, because Canada has also put a block on all foreigners entering, apart from special circumstances. In Greece, you'll need no visa, but there's no flights into Greece right now. Ukraine, you need an e-visa. They're currently closed. So instead, you would need a special letter from the Ukraine government. Georgia, you don't need a visa, but it's closed to all entry right now. Okay. A little bit on hand sanitizer and masks. In most places apart from the US, you'll need to bring these with you, because these countries have run out of these sorts of things. In the US, most hospitals are providing these to parents. They're very difficult to obtain elsewhere. You can make your own masks. We've got some coming in on order for people who aren't traveling for 2 or 3 weeks at minimum. But bear in mind, it's useful to have some of these things when you're going outside, particularly in countries like the USA where the infection rates are so high. Okay, entry to hospitals for births. Most hospitals globally are making it far more difficult for you to enter and be present in the birthing suite. In the past, in the US and Canada, you could be there for the birth. Unfortunately, in these times, that's very difficult. Now, you can apply in the US context or Canadian context to the hospital for special consideration, and your local surrogacy attorney, who's actually in the city where that hospital is, should be doing that, because they're going to have the connections to that hospital if they're a lawyer in that city. You can also yourself approach the hospital with evidence that you're self-isolated for 2 weeks, and the US hospitals apparently tend to take personal approaches quite sympathetically for you to be there. For Ukraine and Georgia, forget about it, you won't get in. If you're not present for the birth, you'll be given custody as soon as your child's discharged from the hospital. In the past, the US system has usually had your surrogate having a support person at the birth. That's probably not possible now for the surrogate to have her support person in the room with her either. Agencies are communicating this to surrogates so they're aware of these differences. Temporary guardianship. Now, look, for most of you with US or Canadian births, you will get there in time for the birth. We're fairly confident. If you were European, it'd be another story, because Europe's so tough at the moment, coming into the USA. There may be cases, though, where things don't work out, and you do need to have a plan B for temporary guardianship. For a local caregiver, it might be a local friend or family member or a paid caregiver. Some agencies in the US are providing care. And in every country, actually, the agencies will organise care. In the US, because of the way the laws work, it's probably got to be something on paper to, in legal terms, about what sort of guardianship this is. Legal guardianship in the US differs by state, so talk to your US attorney about that. Your surrogate is an obvious choice for that temporary guardian, but be very careful of that. It's not being encouraged, because it can lead to attachment issues with the surrogate and the baby, and make it harder for her to say goodbye. So certainly in all these countries, we're not recommending that be the person. But agency staff are stepping in to do this in the states where it's needed. If you're doing this in the USA and you're surrogate in a state with post-birth legal parentage, she's got to sign guardianship orders post-birth, not you. In some states, there's something called standby guardianship, which doesn't require a court order. And some states are putting in temporary foster care arrangements outside the formal foster care system, where it's just a temporary foster care thing. You can also get a carer to be ordered a power of attorney to commence a passport application process if you can't be there for that. Exit times coming home. Look, as some of you will be aware, for the US and Canada, it was once 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. At the moment, it's probably going to be at least a week more than that. The Australian government is doing all it can to facilitate things, but for US and Canada, you're reliant on their systems because you're getting a US passport or a Canadian passport. And their passport officers are on skeleton staff. There are tricks to getting these things done quickly, but if you look at it on our website, but it's not guaranteed. In Ukraine and Georgia, the typical wait time was 6 weeks if you were super organised. It's coming down. We think it'll be a bit less than that, about 5 weeks now, because the Australian government wants to get people home very quickly. I'm now going to focus on. Before I focus on the individual countries, does anybody have any questions about the general issues I've talked about so far that they want to raise?
I know on the Facebook forum, people have advised that the US government has been speaking to Georgian government and they have kind of granted them special permission to enter the country. Is that something that Australian government is also doing?
Look, we have asked the Australian government to do exactly the same. We haven't had a response from them yet about whether they'll do that. Yesterday, I wrote to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Home Affairs on this issue. So we are trying. As you'd be aware, the US government does have more leverage diplomatically than other governments do. So we're trying. I mean, the other complication for Georgia is there's just no access to get in right now via any means. I saw someone else had another question there. Wait a second. Okay, it was a question about Ukraine. We'll come into that in a minute, the Ukraine question. Just hold that question. Any other questions people have got?
Hi, Sam. Just one more question, please.
Yeah.
On the slide that you had initially where you were talking about the flight options, I don't think I saw Georgia on there. What are the flight options for Georgia later on?
There are no flight options for Georgia right now. Unfortunately, we just have got no answers for Georgia. We've got one family with a 2-week-old in Georgia, and they just have not been able to fly. So unfortunately, Georgia was still working on an option. There was talk of flying into Turkey and doing a road transfer from Turkey, but apparently flights to Turkey have currently closed. So you just have to hold tight on that one.
Yeah.
Please, when you do get authorization to travel, please be very careful when you're booking. Don't book these things in a panic. Some people are not looking carefully at the transit time. Some of these flights have 24-hour transit times before your connecting flight. It's a long time to be in an airport, with just one or two of you. And if you look a bit more carefully, there often are much better connections if you look around. It is also better if you can book through a travel agent or direct with the airline rather than a third-party provider. Okay. There's a question from Michael on Greece. No, there's currently any way of getting into Greece for Australians. That'll be reviewed soon, and I'm going to come to that now. I might just share a screen with you again because this is starting to get a bit more complicated. We're going to talk about USA specifics first of all. On this screen here, for those who've got US. So as you know, they've got about 500,000 cases of COVID. New York, New Jersey, Michigan, California are particularly hard hit. ESTA visas are sometimes been cancelled. So you might apply for it online and then 4 days later it might be cancelled for no particular reason. Sometimes this is just a mistake. Somebody's done it by mistake, but you're going to have to check your ESTA visa status regularly with the online portal. passport offices for US passports are closed in most locations. They are open in San Francisco, Seattle, and LA. We know, but only with an appointment. And getting an appointment with those is very tough. Now, there's one trick to this, is if you can get a letter from your US pediatrician regarding the child's high risk of exposure to COVID in the US, that letter will usually be enough to get you an interview with the US Passports Office. You have got to have completed the application beforehand. You've got to have had proof you need to fly home within 3 days, and you've got to have all the other paperwork, such as consent from your surrogate and so forth. But we are seeing success with that. For Canada, I told you need that ETA visa online. Canada has banned foreigners from entering, but they've now put a new law in that if you're an immediate family member of a Canadian infant, that's now considered an IP through surrogacy is one of those people. So to get in on that grounds, you've got to get a permission letter from the Canadian government. You've got to plan for at least a week turnaround for that, get details from your Canadian lawyer on it. They are trying to streamline birth registration in Canada, but we are seeing parents coming in via that route in recent days. It's working. Once they've got the Australian permission and the Canadian permission, and the flights. Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine's particularly difficult. COVID-19 infections are growing 15% every day. There's no flights in currently. They're reconsidering that 24 April in terms of the ban on foreigners, but it doesn't look good. The government may close land borders also. Many land borders are closed. They may close more. Visas are normally required, but they're not available right now because the e-visa portal's shut. We're currently looking at whether special permissions can replace visas. For those who have got Ukraine visas, the Ukraine Ministry of Foreign Affairs will approve you to come in 48 hours before you're due to cross a border into Ukraine. We're sending a parent over there today and her husband, and you have to come in via a country called Belarus, a commercial flight to Minsk, and then a 7-hour transport via car. Usually your agency will pick you up at the airport. Now, there's a lot of paperwork involved with this, but we have finally got approvals for the first case, and a number of Australians will be doing this same route in the weeks ahead with a special entry across the border. The reason we want you to go as soon as you can, get that approval, is the fact that these border crossings may close down. Okay, Greece is in lockdown till 1st of May. Nearly all hotels are closed. Those of you using Crete is not accessible by foreigners at the moment. So we're just hoping the situation in Greece does improve. But luckily, we haven't got any Australians with births there for a few months yet. Georgia has got all its government offices closed, so they're not issuing birth certificates. Actually, I should come back to Ukraine for a second on the birth certificate issue. Both parents need to be present for a birth certificate to be issued. Normally, you need a birth certificate to get citizenship. The government is working out a workaround solution to that at the moment, which I'll come to in a minute. Okay, so for those with births in Georgia, because you can't get a birth certificate, Foreign Affairs and Trade will accept translations of a certificate from the hospital saying there's been a birth and some medical records for the child of the surrogate. So what I'm trying to say is processing of documents is happening in Georgia and Ukraine without the parents being there at the moment, if you get onto it and you're organised. As someone pointed out, the US has granted approval for people to enter Georgia right now, but we don't know how they're going to get in unless someone does a charter flight. In Georgia, the lockdown is particularly strict. You can only go outside in daylight hours, and you can only go to a supermarket, a doctor, or a pharmacy. There's very limited medical attention for babies. There's a shortage of masks. You won't be allowed to visit your child in hospital until they're discharged, and you've had your 2 weeks in quarantine. So just for those guys who are having to get the citizenship done overseas, like Ukraine, Greece, Georgia, Mexico, as I mentioned, the process can be started before you get there. You've got to get signed copies of your surrogacy agreement, your contract. They can take the photo of your baby for citizenship and passport purposes, but you must send them the guidelines the Australian government has about how those photos need to look. They can sign the back of it and so forth. They can get you the surrogate's ID documents, the consent forms, the IVE certificate, IV stuff, the hospital letters, and they can send them to you. You can upload all those documents yourself to your immigration account here in Australia. So we are having these things done. So it looks like it will be possible for those people who can't travel right now to get at least citizenship done for the baby before they get there, or have that done sort of soon after they arrive, so that bit's done. But you do need to be onto it. The DNA testing process for those using Georgia and Ukraine, once you've submitted your citizenship application online, that'll generate an email from DFAT to you to finalise the DNA test. So they'll say, we now invite you to do a DNA test at this location on this date with your baby. If you're not in the country, you can authorise a representative from the clinic to take your baby to that DNA test if they have power attorney to do so. So even that can be done without you being there. So that's how that's working. So just as a summary of what I've been through so far, book your travel now if you haven't done so already. Book it for as soon as possible if your birth's prior to 30 June for at least one of you to go over. And make sure it's 2 weeks before the birth. Open an immigration account if you're getting an Australian passport overseas. Wait for your travel exemption to come through. And with those travel exemptions, make sure you have uploaded proof of birth on a particular date in a particular country. Apply for your visa for US or Canada, and apply for your entry permit for Canada or Ukraine. For Georgia, there's not much you can do right now. Apart from in Georgia, you can get your citizenship organised once the baby's born. And we're hoping this situation will change in the weeks ahead. Has anyone got any questions about this so far?
Sam, I've got a question about returning to Australia from overseas. So, obviously there's this 2 weeks quarantine in a hotel when we get back.
Yeah.
Is there going to be any likelihood of that being relaxed for people coming back with newborns?
At this stage, we've been advised no, that they're going to be particularly strict on that. There was a case, we've had 3 people now return from the USA since the lockdown. One came in just after the lockdown. Her family was allowed to go to their home because they could prove they had a granny flat out the back where the child could be quarantined in a granny flat. Now, we were surprised this was allowed, and the advice is that it's unlikely other cases will get through, because particularly states like New South Wales, who've had so much criticism over the people coming off a ship, are really trying to be really strict on this kind of stuff now. So please expect that you will be in a hotel for 2 weeks. We have arranged an army of volunteers in each capital city to bring your stuff if you want supplies. So you can call on us to get deliveries brought into your hotel. They'll be left at reception for you. This is going to be particularly difficult for you. When we had our kids overseas, we were stuck in hotel rooms for a while, and it is hard, I know. But bear in mind, we have got people who are there to support you. You should be prepared, though, when you're traveling back, to have some things for the hotel room, things like formula and things there, so you haven't got to sort of, wait for the order to come in. You can do online orders and they'll deliver them to reception for you. But for those of you who need things instantly, like formula and stuff, you'll need to make sure you're super prepared. I've got some questions here about how long exemptions are taking to approve. It's based a bit on when your travel date is, and on your country you're going to. The Ukraine exemptions have been prioritised because Ukraine is so problematic. But they seem to be taking, look, we've had, I think, about 4 exemptions approved out of 40 submitted so far. And they were all for travel, that needed to happen very soon. So if you decide you want to go earlier after this meeting today, you can go in and submit again with a new submission with a changed travel date, but you really should show evidence of a flight you're going to take. Okay, there's a question here about, do you need to have, wait a second. Okay, Ukraine. Do you think the Ukraine borders will open on 24 April? No, we don't think they will. So we think you may have to go in via Belarus, as I explained before. And coming back to Australia, look, we don't know. It's changing every week. You need to be flexible. We do advise you can get a one-way fare into these countries. Perhaps don't book your return flight yet, because it's unknown yet whether you'll need to come back out of Belarus or back out of Ukraine. If your baby's not due until September or October, what action should you take? Look, I think just hold tight and wait and see. Things are changing so fast. There's not much we can do yet. We will hope that things are better by then. I don't think we'd even. You could put your travel request into the Department of Home Affairs, because they want those travel requests in now so they can plan for emergency flights if there aren't commercial flights available. But at the moment, they're making everybody go on commercial flights. How strict are the travel and visa restrictions to get into Belarus? Good question. Belarus is one of the most lax countries around this at the moment. So they will give you a transit visa on arrival, but you'll need a letter of authority from a Belarus business. Your agency will help you organise that. And you'll need to show you have permission from the Ukraine government to enter Ukraine, which you'll probably get very last minute. But it's one of the few countries which are allowing foreigners to enter it at the moment. How long can proof? We've done that one. More information about opening an immigration account. I'll put that up on our website blog today about how to open an IMI account for those who haven't done so yet. So just check out the blog entry on Australians needing to access travel on the Growing Family site for that. Entering the States, what other documents do IPs need to provide? Do you need a pre-birth order in place? No, you don't need a pre-birth order in place, although if you do have one, then please attach it to your documents. You do need to show evidence of the expected date of birth and place of birth from your IVF clinic who did the transfer, ideally. Any possibility of a special plane service from Australia to Ukraine or Belarus? At this stage, no, because the numbers just aren't there to justify it. But if the situation gets worse, then possibly. But at this stage, the government has said no. Don't you need a return flight as evidence before entering a country? Yes, good question. You usually do need return flights to some countries. In these extraordinary times, a lot of those rules are going out the window. But let me clarify that with the Belarusian people this week. But it seems to be the case that no, they're not asking for that, Belarus particularly. As most countries require proof of return. Yeah, okay. Okay, if your flight has been cancelled, so you can't give a flight date,
Yep.
then just give a date you would like to fly on your application or your revised application. you will often have to change airlines and fly with a different airline to the one you'd wanted to fly with, because so few airlines are now flying out of Australia.
Thank you.
How do you apply to enter Ukraine? Okay, so this is complicated. To enter Ukraine, you've got to first wait until Australia has given you permission to exit Australia. Once they've done that, you need to notify our office, and we will help you with an application to our embassy in Kiev. So Ukraine will not take applications from parents. They'll only take applications that are from a diplomatic source, i.e. our embassy. So there is a process, but it has to be done via our embassy. So we'll help with that when you get permission to, because Ukraine won't help until you have permission to leave Australia.
Correct.
Okay, your visa's only valid from okay, we don't know yet whether people can travel to Ukraine without the visa. We're trying to negotiate that at the moment. If you're in Melbourne and your flight is going from Sydney, do you need to quarantine for 2 weeks in New South Wales? This is a common question. Many people are having to transit to other Australian cities to get their international flight. No, you don't need to do your 2 weeks quarantine in New South Wales. You can transfer direct at the airport, even if it requires an airport shuttle bus. That is allowed. But you will have to have that permission from the Australian government to travel overseas. That will be the passport for you to do that transfer. Are there any other questions people have? Safety measures to carry newborn back to Australia. Look, so what will happen in terms of procedures, once you've been granted permission to exit out of the country, and this will happen easier for those with Canada and the USA, you will then be ringing your airline to get a bassinet seat on the airline, and that should be quite easy because there's no one traveling, so there's plenty of seats left on the airlines that are traveling. In terms of safety, airlines that are going are now sort of seating people in sort of a checkerboard pattern where they're spacing people out throughout the plane. Some of them are taking only 100 passengers per flight, so people are at a distance on the flights. Obviously, you can use masks on the flights if you want to. I'm not sure if they're insisting on that, but certainly the kind of safety measures that everybody's been plugging in the media for the last few weeks are the kind of things you should be following in terms of hand washing and sanitizer and so forth. Okay, there's a question here about in Canada you've got to transfer to a Newfoundland to another province. Our understanding right now is you will quarantine in your final destination. Yes, there are flights to other parts of Canada once you come into one of the limited entry ports, but those flights to other provinces are limited, only operating every now and then. So you may be in an airport for a day or more until you can get your connecting flight. But have a look at that online before you book. Okay, we are based in Iceland with the Australian government in Australia. We'll need to contact the Ukrainian government for permission to enter, or do we need to go through our local embassy? So if you are an Australian couple in Iceland, then it has to be done through the Australian embassy. And it's best done through our contacts. We're centralising these requests through one port, so just make sure you're on the list we have for the Ukraine government. But you must be an Australian citizen to be on the list. If you're a citizen of another country, we have other people who can help you. If circumstances change in the USA and we're required to be there longer than 90 days, getting a visa extension. So visa extensions are possible and should be done online for those of you who may need to stay extra time. It's come up in the US professional meetings we've been having lately. So bear in mind that will be that will be possible if it's needed. Is an indication if United Airlines will continue flights ongoing? Look, no, we don't know that, which is why we want you to travel now if you burst before 30 June. As you know, the situation in the USA is worsening by the day. The travel restrictions now domestically are very lax in the USA, but the government might decide they get sick of people dying and they want to tighten things down. Can the DNA test done for citizenship be used to apply for a passport? So, no. So the passport process for those of you who go to Ukraine or Georgia is separate to the citizenship process. Passports can't be done until your citizenship has been granted. Passports require a different application form. It can be done online also, but it requires signed consents from your surrogate. And as they can't be initiated until citizenship has come through. All passports will be emergency ones though, yes. So they will be done within a week of your application. They're quite quick. In the Australian government is allowing IPs children to travel. This question is about governments allowing children to travel with you on flights. We have not had any kickback from the Australian High Commission yet about child applicants. Probably about 6 of our families have asked for children to travel, and we've yet had no one saying no, they can't travel. But none of them have yet been authorised. At this stage, we're notifying parents that yes, you can travel with your infants, but please don't bring along your mum or your dad to help out with childcare. They won't be allowed to travel. Okay. If you get exemptions as a family, do you have to travel together or not? No, you can travel at different times. That's a good question. And some people are choosing for one of them to go over early and the other to stay behind. We recognise some of you have work commitments here that you want to maintain as long as possible. So you don't need to travel together. That's not required. For emergency passports, do you still need to go to Warsaw for passport? We don't know. Probably not. It's the same for you. The Georgian cases used to have to go to Turkey. We think not. The Turkish Australian embassy in Turkey has been evacuated to Sydney, to Canberra, so there's no staff there anyway. So you probably won't need to travel on a plane to get the passport. It will come to you. Do you know how long the permit will allow you to stay in Ukraine? So the permit to enter Ukraine has not got a time date on it. It's just saying you're allowed to enter. But it's only been done so far for those who have visas to enter. And we've probably only got 4 Australian couples who got the visas. Our understanding is that though it's not time constrained, the governments know the situation here. They know that you don't want to stay there for longer than you need to. So we will be trying to get you out of those countries as soon as possible. Okay. Any other questions?
Yep.
Yep.
Could I ask one?
Yep.
Oh yeah, Sam. Look, with the logistics of the travel, you have to get the exemption, and we can't really get the exemption to travel. It seems without the because it's compassionate grounds before the baby is actually born. Even though we are putting in some evidence, people are putting a variety of things. You're uploading the birth date to that travel exemption sort of attachment. But the thing is, we can't really fly early without being able to get that exemption. And you were saying that it's highly likely things will get worse. So, we can't get out of here without the exemption. So we have to wait around until whatever date the child is born for them, because they won't let us go without good condition. So we can't actually get out of here before the child is born anyway. Would I be correct?
No, that's not correct. No, they will allow you to travel as soon as you want to travel, because they know you've got to be quarantined in these countries. So no, they're not waiting till a birth date to give you permission. They're actually saying if your flight is on this date, and you can show there's a birth coming up, and you want to go over there now, then yes, we understand you need to go. We will do what we can to get you on that flight.
Okay, I have put a flight date, but I haven't heard from them yet, and that flight date is coming up very soon, but I still haven't heard anything from them.
Well, look, just email me and we'll escalate that case for you with them over the weekend. That's
okay. Thanks, Sam.
that's
Thanks.
fine. So just on that point, so there is the chance to escalate cases if you want to fly early and you haven't had a response from government. We are able to push certain cases and say, look, this one hasn't been approved yet. Please give it extra priority because, this parent has got a flight booked on this date. Keep an eye on your flight bookings, though. As you would have been aware, flights are regularly being cancelled and you're having to be rebooked on flights. So please let us know, or if your flight arrangements change, your date of travel changes, because it'll, yeah.
Thanks. Great.
Okay. Anything?
Sam, I just got a quick question about the travel exemptions. If you've been approved to travel, say in a few weeks' time, but things change and Bubs is now coming early, can you change a flight and get out with a different date on the travel exemption?
Oh, yes, certainly. The approval of travel is not date specific. It's just saying you can fly. So certainly you can change the date of travel. That's up to you and the airline.
Okay, thanks, Sam.
And bear in mind, any of you who are expecting twins will come 2 to 4 weeks early at least, on average. So please bear that in mind in terms of your travel dates. The other information we've had from the Canadian surrogacy providers is that because many of these surrogates are very stressed in these conditions, that stress is leading to some of these babies being born earlier. So also bear in mind that your birth date could be well before you think it's going to be. Someone said thank you. That's really nice. Okay. All right. Any other questions people have got before we go? They want to ask. What's that?
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Yeah, mate. First of all, thanks for your time and support at these times and time.
That's all right.
Now, all goes well. We fly out to Minsk and get these transfers to Ukraine. Is that Minsk airport to the Ukraine border or straight to Kiev to our apartment?
That's a good question. So that will be direct to Kiev. So you will be in a car direct to Kiev. So it'll be the one mode of transport the whole way. Now, only Lotus is the only agency who's able to organise that vehicle transport. So far, we're working with other agencies to see whether they can organise a driver. If not, there are trains and buses requiring changes, but we're hoping we'll get you all drivers if needed. Look, just another question I didn't raise before is if we do offer a customised support service for those of you who either are not good at paperwork, or need extra pushing because you need to get home particularly quickly, or are finding this incredibly stressful. We can advocate and guide you on your behalf and sort of hold your hand through this. That's on a cost basis, though. You'll pay for that about $500. But we do get some parents who want to call us every day and guide them through the whole process because they're just not coping very well or have never been good at paperwork or negotiation. So we don't encourage you all to take it up. You won't all need it. But for those of you who do want extra support, there is that service there along the way. Okay. Volunteers for any hotel deliveries. No, we have tons of volunteers around the country, so we don't need that right now. Particularly because we haven't got anybody home yet who's even in a hotel. So that's the thing. What happens if your babies come early and you haven't been able to get visas due to border closure? Okay, so look, arrangements are being made with hospitals to care for your children while you're not there. So they will be able to stay in the hospital for around a week with nurse care. After that week, there will be nanny care done in an apartment or something for you, which you'll pay for. But the agencies have all putting those plans in place. So please don't worry about not being there for the child's early week. Sometimes that is going to be unavoidable. The kids will be in really good hands, and we're doing the best we can there. If you dual passport holder for an EU country, will it make getting into Greece easier? Yes, I think so. I think for EU citizens, that is easier to get in right now. Is that $500 USD for support? No, it's $500 Australian plus GST for support. Okay. Can all the IP groups together from Australia to Belarus and Belarus to Kiev? Look, it looks like we may be getting a bulk approval for Australians to travel to Ukraine early next week. If that comes through, there's still going to be a lot of negotiation to do in terms of the Ukraine government. But if we can all get you approved to travel at once, then yes, perhaps we'll put you all on the same flight. Together, I think it would help. Because we know we've got at least 7 couples coming up with births in Ukraine in the next 1 to 6 weeks. Okay. Please keep a check on the blogs on the Growing Family site, because this information goes up on those blogs every day in terms of changes to arrangements for different countries, and also about changes to airlines and so forth. Also be aware that if you're using sites like skyscanner.com.au to check for flights, the flights that are listed on Skyscanner aren't always available. You do need to go direct to the airline to check that the flight you've seen on Skyscanner is available. Don't buy those flights through the third-party cheap resellers, because if they need to be changed, it'll be a nightmare. Buy them direct from the airline or from the travel agent. Okay, that's another nice. Thank you for your leadership. That's really nice. What do you recommend in declaring dollars? Okay, so if you need to be taking a large amounts of cash out of the country, then the government has no rules saying you can't do that. They just want you to declare that on the form when you leave. So don't be afraid about putting the amount you are carrying on you out of the country. It's better than being caught with it, but it's going to be the least of their worries right now. They're just happy to get you on a plane. Do you need Australian citizenship to leave Canada after birth? Okay, so the child can travel to Australia with the Canadian passport. So with just a tourist visa in it, and then once you're back here in Australia, you can get the Australian documents. Now, something that may happen though is some of you may find it impossible to get that Canadian or US passport because of these shutdowns. If that's the case, it may be wise to concurrently apply for your for your Australian citizenship, so that in case you're having problems with Canadian documents, at least you've got the Australian citizenship in the pipeline. But if you get the Canadian one first, travel on that. If your baby's been born 15 July, should you travel now? Yes, probably, but it's up to you. If you're declaring dollars in Ukraine, no, they won't take the money off you. No, it's your money. They're not going to steal it.
Sam, what about a scenario where let's say you can't get there for the birth, but you can get all the paperwork done electronically. is it possible to have an appointed guardian bring a baby into Australia
We
and then
talked about that with
fly immediately back?
we talked about that with the Ukraine embassy this week, and at the moment they're saying, "What the fuck? That's beyond their comprehension." But look, it may be required if we can't get people in. But the current rules in Ukraine are you can't get the birth certificate till both parents are there. So we don't think babies will be allowed to travel without the birth certificate, the official one. So we will have to get you in there, we think, at the moment. But look, as I said, the rules are changing every day on this. So yes, that is a possibility that we've talked about in other Australian professional meetings in the last week. Okay. Turkey embassy's been closed, moved to Canberra. Will all the interviews for Georgia? The interviews for Georgia won't be conducted in Canberra, no. They'll be done on the phone in Georgia. You won't need to travel. We understand. If you decide to fly now, what lead time should we give on the flight? A good question. Look, I would give it a week. No more than a week ahead. So book your flights for a week from now. But mind you, we've got Easter right now as well. So, look, I would go a week from Tuesday, perhaps. Yeah. Look, and if you want to go earlier, then we can push it through earlier. We're just going to have to push a bit harder with the government. Okay. I mean, obviously, a lot of people normal people don't want to fly on planes at the moment. You guys are doing what the rest of the world doesn't want to do, is leave their own country. Most of Australia government is on getting Australian citizens home, whereas you guys are doing the reverse. So it's an extraordinary situation that most of the government doesn't understand. And so advocating in this area has proved quite hard because the focus on getting geriatric travellers back into Australia off cruise ships, where our feeling is that your needs are far more urgent given you've got vulnerable newborns. So if any of you have contacts in federal government we can leverage, please let us know. Okay, would normal travel insurance still be working now? Oh, good question. We haven't looked into that. I don't know. You'll have to check with the company. They should have statements on their websites about whether their travel insurance is valid under these circumstances. So have a look at that, or ask your travel agent. We have had some word that Flight Centre is perhaps not the best provider to be using right now because they're putting so many staff off. We have got names of a few good smaller travel agents. If you need them, we can send you, but email us later. AMEX website says no about travel insurance. So it's not valid. Okay, right. So yeah, so what we're saying is you can't rely on travel insurance. We are sending the government a number of reasons why it's important to get children home quickly. Part of those reasons are we don't want these children to be a burden to the foreign health system. We don't want you guys to be paying big medical bills in the USA if the kid got sick. So the sooner we can get you home, the better. Should we add the baby's name to travel insurance while coming back? Yes, I think so. If you can, you should definitely do that. If you can, yep. Look. Most of the parents, have been really understanding with this situation. As the surrogates, obviously, this is totally out of our control. This will sort out solutions for all of you. The babies won't be left behind, but just be patient with it and just be prepared for things to happen at the last minute a bit. but please try and be organised as much as you can with the processes we've talked about today. Can my wife give me power of attorney to apply for a birth certificate on my own in Ukraine? Oh, good question. We're going to have to find out that answer to that. I don't know. We'll have to find that out. All right, guys. Look, there's a, for those of you who aren't on it, there's a Facebook group for people traveling overseas for births at the moment, which you could join, because we're going to put notices in that as well. So email me if you need a link to that group if you're not already on it. And I think that's all the questions. So I hope that's helpful. As I say, we're doing the best we can, but it's just taking a while. So it's good to have a good turnout. We'll put this recording online for those people who missed it. Okay, so I hope you have a good Easter. It's going to be a pretty quiet Easter, but best of luck to everybody, and speak to me if you need to. Okay, thanks everybody.